To our webinar series, Connecting Youth to Urban Waterways. Thanks for joining us today, and thanks to many of you who have been tuning in throughout this great series over the last few weeks. Today is the third and final part in this series, and we're happy to be hosting this webinar series on behalf of the Urban Waters Federal Partnership at the Delaware River location. My name is Emily Bombeck. I'm the Estuary Program Coordinator at the Partnership for the Delaware Estuary, and I'll be moderating today's webinar. Now, before we get started, I'm going to just go over some general housekeeping information for the webinar today. First, all participants are automatically muted with the video turned off when joining the webinar. You should only be able to see presenters and moderators' videos during the webinar. Second, if you have any questions during or after the presentations, please use the Q&A feature to ask questions. I'll be moderating the Q&A, and we have a Q&A session built into today's program after each of the two presentations. And third, the chat is disabled for participants, but we will be sharing some links and resources with attendees in the chat. And last, this webinar is being recorded in case you'd like to view later. It'll be posted on PD's YouTube page, and we'll also have presentation slide decks posted on our Urban Waters page on PD's website. For anyone who isn't familiar with the Partnership for the Delaware Estuary, or PDE, we're an environmental nonprofit organization that was established in 1996. And PDE is the host of the Delaware Estuary Program, one of 28 national estuary programs designated by Congress to promote and protect America's estuaries. And our mission is to lead science-based and collaborative efforts to improve the tidal Delaware River and Bay. And while PD is hosting this webinar series, this is an event on behalf of the Urban Waters Federal Partnership at the Delaware River location. The goal of the Urban Waters Federal Partnership is to restore and reconnect urban communities, particularly those that are overburdened or economically distressed, to waterways by improving coordination among federal agencies. The Delaware River Urban Waters location encompasses 4 major areas. This includes Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, Wilmington, Delaware, Camden, New Jersey, and Chester, Pennsylvania. So we'd love to learn a little bit more about our audience today. So we'll be asking a couple polling questions just to get a feel for who's in the room before we get started today. So Erica, if you'd like to launch the first poll for us, please. And our first question is, what sector do you represent? Nonprofit, educator, government, student, private sector, or other? All right, great. Looks like a little less than half the audience represents nonprofit as well as government. And then we also have some folks that are educators in the private sector and other. Thanks. We have another question for all of you. And this next question is, how did you hear about this webinar today? Social media post, web blast, PD website, employer, colleague, friend or family, or other? All right, it looks like a little over half folks tuned in today heard about this from a PD email blast, about a third from an employer colleague, and then some social media posts and other. Great. Thank you. And we have one last poll question for all of you today. And this last question is, where are you tuning into this webinar from? All right, great. Looks like almost everybody is tuning in from our region, Mid-Atlantic, East Coast. We have a couple folks from Southeast Coast as well as the Gulf Coast. That's great. Thanks, everyone. All right, so we have another great lineup of speakers this afternoon to share their work on youth engagement. We'll first hear from the Delaware Museum of Natural History, where Brendan Pronteau is the School and Communities Programs Coordinator. Brendan received his MA in Public History from SUNY University at Albany. He's managed education programs at Hanford Mills Museum in East Meredith, New York, and the George Ranch Historical Park in Richmond, Texas, and also worked as an educator at the Eastern State Penitentiary in Philadelphia. That's pretty cool. And other historical sites and museums in New York and Virginia. We will also hear from Cathy Perrotto, who is the Public Engagement Manager with the Delaware Museum of Natural History and has been there for 7 years, working in a variety of capacities, including formal as well as informal programs and exhibit design to support the museum's mission to inspire people of all ages to a lifetime of exploration and discovery. Before coming to the museum, she worked for several of the Delaware state parks, including the Brandywine Zoo and Wilmington State Parks, eventually becoming lead interpreter at Brandywine Creek State Park. We'll then be turning it over to Robin Irizarry. Robin has been involved with the Alliance for Watershed Education since the beginning in 2016, when he worked as the Philadelphia Watershed Coordinator for the Tookonie-Tacony-Frankford Watershed Partnership and served on the Alliance's Advisory Committee. In 2019, Robin was hired as the Alliance's Fellowship Coordinator and is now based out of the Audubon Discovery Center in Philadelphia. Robin has a BS in Landscape Architecture from Temple University and has previously worked in ecological landscape design and construction across the Southeast Pennsylvania. In his free time, Robin is a woodworker and avid birder and enjoys helping connect people with the natural world around his hometown of Philadelphia. So with that, we're going to go ahead and get started, and I'm going to turn it over to the Delaware Museum of Natural History to kick us off today. Once I stop sharing my screen. All right, Cathy and Brendan, whenever you're ready.
There we go.
There we go.
Perfect.
All right. Hi. So I'm Brendan. This is Cathy.
Hello.
Coming to you from the Delaware Museum of Natural History. Before we dive into like a programming and kind of other resources here, just a quick overview of who we are. So the museum opened in 1972, and since then we've been informing and inspiring people of all ages about science, nature. Last year, before COVID hit, in 2019, we had about 70,000 people come into the museum to look at our exhibits, attend events, and occasionally do research. There's also been about 12,000 people in 2019 that we worked with offsite, so in different schools, different community events, and other events as well. Large portion of our audience in kind of a normal year is school and community groups coming in for tours and families. School groups accounted for about 20,000 people coming into the museum, including about 9,000 or so underserved students from Title I schools. And how did COVID-19 affect our programs? As I'm sure kind of many nonprofits have experienced, we had at first a large cancellation of our programs. Had about 100 programs canceled in the spring and summer of 2020. That led to almost no school and community programming in the summer and fall. That resulted in about 10,000 people kind of losing ability to access the museum, and had about 30 or so programs that we were expecting in the fall get canceled as well. When the building closed, found that we kind of lost our biggest resource, as it is for most museums. So we started to adapt to a new program format without really a space for our staff to do that. So without access to collections, without access to kind of a physical location for us even to do the work that we really want to do and bring our programming to the community. Additionally, I started about 3 days before the building closed in Delaware, which led to having to develop and adapt programming without knowing what resources we had here in terms of our collection, our staff, and the spaces we were working with. We also didn't really have a virtual idea of where to put all these virtual programs in the museum, what spaces would be best for them. So we really kind of had to work all that out without knowing exactly what the building was going to look like or kind of what was involved. This picture is actually one of the ways we started working with the community while we were closed. If anyone's familiar with Minecraft, one of our staff members did recreate the entire museum and some of our collections in Minecraft and kind of open it up to the community as well. That's like a really good way to talk about how we are adapting our programming to a post-COVID world. So started designing programs using different technology over Zoom, making sure that we could kind of still present high quality, engaging educational programs for students, for summer camps, introducing things like story times and showing people our animal ambassadors virtually as well. We also started to get some new technology into the building. So before COVID kind of closed everything down, we received a grant to put in a large interactive touch wall in our nature nook, which is where we are right now. As you can see behind us, this mural kind of shows that this was supposed to be a very engaging space. It's where our youngest learners came in to really explore nature, animals, and different habitats, and has been closed down even after we opened in the summer. So this really has become our virtual programming space. And that large kind of interactive touch wall has allowed us to do some engaging programming without just simply presenting a PowerPoint to different school groups that are coming in. And we started to kind of regain some of that community impact. So an anonymous foundation gave us about $40,000 to present programming to Title I schools in 2020 to 2021. We've already scheduled, mostly in December through June, have almost 200 of those programs on our calendar with many more to come, which is a great kind of boon for us and for our audiences. Additionally, DuPont has subsidized about 125 programs for underserved middle school audiences through a $20,000 grant. All these things are really coming together to allow our school and community programs to really flourish during a time when we're really concerned about how we're going to reach our audiences in a really meaningful, impactful way. The Delaware Teen Science Cafe is another way we're trying to really establish and continue impacting our local community. So Teen Science Cafe is a national organization. We host the only chapter in Delaware. And it's for teens by teens. They have different themes: forensics, chemistry, food flavoring was one of the themes they talked about, where they have presentations from teens and scientists. One of the topics they're exploring for next year is actually water quality. And as we kind of move forward with our programming, we are trying to focus a lot more on waterways and human connections. So one of those DuPont programs is actually going to be all about the Prime Hook Nature Preserve. Over the last 10 years or so, for those of you that aren't familiar, they needed to pretty much replumb the entire system to kind of reestablish that ecosystem and allow for the health of that entire area. So these new DuPont programs are actually going to give students case studies, information, and allow them, when we're able, to do some hands-on activities and really get some experience with some of these skills. It also allows us to kind of reestablish our educational identity. So focusing on what the human connection is for all of this, focusing on human choice, human connection to science and nature, and really focusing on why what we're doing here is important and emphasizing that. And that becomes really important when we're talking about the resources we have here. Cathy's going to talk to you about some of those now.
Thank you, Brendan. So, as Brendan discussed, we have a lot of new technology here that we are utilizing to really reach out to the community again, especially with this grant funding and these new programs that have this focus on our waterways. So how can we connect our guests, especially youth, with that? Well, one of the huge assets that we have here at the Delaware Museum of Natural History are our collections. And we have several different collections here that we get to, really, it's great, we get to share with literally people all over the world. As this picture shows, this is one of the drawers in only one of the cabinets upstairs in our collections and research department. And that is, this particular picture is of the Unidae family. So this is a local Delaware species, which is great. And these collections that we have are accessible for us to use for teaching, especially since we can't have as many people in the museum. We can share this out with them in a multitude of ways. So this is just a quick breakdown of department, the scientific collection here. We have over 2 million mollusks, so seashells, and you can see our collections manager standing on the right-hand side, that right-hand picture, in one aisleway with an assortment of drawers from all the cabinets laid out. So we have quite a few shells here, and many of them are local, which is a fabulous resource to have. We are actually the 10th largest mollusk collection in North America. So for little old Delaware, that's really great to say. We also have other specimens here. So we have 113,000 bird specimens, and that includes clutches of eggs, as you can see in the picture on the lower left, and includes study skins, which you can see in the upper left. They look like birds on a stick, but that's a study skin. And we also have skeletons and wings. And many of these are, again, local birds. Our director of the Collections and Research Department, Dr. Jean Woods, is an ornithologist, and she specializes in shorebirds. So she goes down every year and helps with the shorebird study down in Lower Delaware. So we have a great connection to the local waterways, and we're able to share that research out. So this is a quick overview of our scientific collection. Again, it's only one collection we have. This is a nice spotlight of some of the Delaware shells that we have there. And the scientific collection, these are specimens that are in our research collections and research department, and they are locked away. So it is special access, but we do have a lot of programs that allow you to have access to that through us. And that means that these specimens have certain information. They have to know where they were found, who found it, what it is, and when it was found. So it has to have very specific information for that. So that's scientific collection. And what do we do with that? Well, a lot of it is being digitized. I mean, it's being made available online. And it's a pretty amazing resource. The data that from each of those specimens is then made available through websites, databases that are listed here all over the world. And this isn't just something that was just created for just scientists. This is actually created due to a grant from the National Science Foundation in collaboration with Widener University. So our scientists work very closely with undergraduate universities, especially at Widener. And currently we are working on digitizing the collections for specimens from the Eastern Seaboard. So all of our local waterways are going to be represented on here in the near future, so that anyone, it doesn't have to be researchers, undergrads, students, anyone who's interested can contact this, go to these databases, and there are educational resources there as well. We've used some of those resources for our summer camps, and we'll be using some for our future programming, as Brendan discussed. So it is an amazing, amazing resource for anyone to use. Now, sorry, I hit the wrong button. There we go. So as I talked about this connection with university students, so we are connecting the college students directly with our collection. And that's one of the Widener students there with our curator of mollusks on the left-hand side. She has the scarf. And we have worked with Widener University to create what's called BCEE Net. It's a little hard to say, but essentially this is a countrywide access point for course-based study and research using natural history collections. So this is someone here in Delaware can access a collection from a museum in Florida or Colorado, and active research is being done. And this was established and created with students. So it's a really, really great organization that we have made this connection with. And again, this was also funded by a grant from the NSF. So that's if people use our scientific collections. We are also able to take some of our other collections out into the community, out into the museum, and share that with the general public and the youth. Especially, we're using it on our virtual programming with students. And so some of the collections we have, scientific collection is upstairs, locked away. Down here with us in the public engagement department, we have our own collections. On the left-hand side is preview into one of our traveling science kits, is what we call it. These are specifically fossils from the C&D Canal, the Chesapeake and Delaware Canal. And so we're able to connect today's waterways with waterways of more ancient times from different geologic eras. So that is a really fun way to tie people in and realize how our ecosystems have changed over millions and millions of years with this up close personal view. We also have ambassador animals, as you saw in the earlier picture with the virtual program. We have found that they are a great resource to have. And I have our friend who's been digging a lot with us. One of ours is our lovely box turtle, Sheldon, even though she's a girl, but they named her before they realized that. So Sheldon is one of our star ambassador animals. They're a live animal collection that we have. And they're another way for us to make that connection between our guests, the youth, the students that we're working with, and really emphasize how important it is for them to care for our ecosystems. And we can connect them with water quality, water conservation, very important like that. So what's happening with us? Well, besides COVID, sorry, she's a little dirty there. We have another unique challenge here. We are planning to close on January 1st for an entire year of renovation. It's called Museum Metamorphosis, so it is incredibly exciting. And we are moving forward with a great emphasis on Delaware waterways. This is an overview shot. We call it a peek, not a promise. So this is a peek into what we are hoping to design for the museum for when we reopen in 2022. As you can see, if anyone's familiar with the museum, the galleries are changing and we are moving forward, reimagining to become an interactive, ecosystem-based and engaging experience. So moving away from, there's a lot of misconceptions about museums being just stodgy and not really fun to go to. Well, we're changing that. We are going to be that museum everyone, they want to go to already, they want to go to again. So this is a quick overview of what's going to be on the focus on Delaware. If you're familiar with the museum, we have a room with 2 large dinosaur skeletons in it, and they are one of our pride here. And we are still going to have dinosaurs in the museum, so no one worry about that. They're just moving to a different area and getting more spotlighted, but that room is going to be opened up, and we're going to have a focus on Delaware, and especially really key ecosystems in Delaware. And the ecosystems you can see here are such as the bald cypress swamp, the salt marshes, coastal dunes, Delaware Bay, and the temperate forest. And each of these ecosystems is represented with what is going to be like you're walking into the ecosystem, and there's a great tie-through of water and how important water is to each of them. Such as the bald cypress swamp, the main interpretive theme there is adaptations to living in the water, because it is a unique water source. So we'll be representing that with some activities like you'll be in a glass bottom boat and be able to see what it looks like going down into the water. The salt marsh is going to have an emphasis on how the marshes protect, provide, and purify the water around us. And we're going to be showing the differences between high tide and low tide. Coastal dunes, everyone's favorite, horseshoe crab migration and their connection with shorebirds, which connects to our collections again. It's all a big cycle here. Then we have the Delaware Bay, which is going to look like we're pulling columns of water up out of the bay for you to see into. It's going to be really interesting. And that's going to look at the life cycles and how those organisms, all that links to the other waterways in the area, such as the marshes, oceans, rivers, and such. And finally, our temperate forest, we're going to be representing freshwater streams and vernal pools in there. So again, with the new exhibits, something Brendan discussed is we're going to be updating our programming as well to match with this, so we really can have this great emphasis for the youth in this area to explore the entire state of Delaware in our museum. So just a quick drawing that has been made of the Delaware Bay exhibit, so you can see that it is going to be chock full with lots of interpretive elements that we can use for education, but it's also going to be engaging for the general public. So we're very, very excited. One other part we're going to be adding is an interesting find from Delaware a few years ago. If anyone remembers, a juvenile humpback whale was found, unfortunately dead, but over. And this is our curator of collections, Dr. Jean Woods, discussing the find of the juvenile whale, which we were able to salvage a lot of the skeleton due to a grant from NOAA. So here we go.
We have here some bones from a humpback whale that originally washed up at Port Mahon and then was towed down here by the Department of Natural Resources to north of Pickering Beach here. And I first saw this whale a year ago in May, and it was just super cool. I had never seen a dead whale before. I'd never touched a dead whale. And so I went back to the museum and told them all, like, you won't believe what I saw this week. And they were all very excited about the opportunities this presented. If we could get some of the bones from the whale to bring them to the museum, to use them in our exhibits and our educational programming, to teach people about whales, about the ocean. I mean, the ocean is right here in Delaware. And so this is a great opportunity for the museum. It's from Delaware. Yeah, so that was what we really liked about this. It was a Delaware story. It washed up dead in Delaware. It was on the beach in Delaware, decomposing. We're the Delaware Museum of Natural History. And so that was a great story, rather than, you know, we probably could have gotten whale bones from somewhere else, but they wouldn't have been a Delaware story. So that was one thing that we really liked.
There you go. As Dr. Wood said, is a Delaware story, so it's a great connection for us. We're going to be incorporating it into some of the new exhibits, so we're very excited for that. And all of this, everything that Brendan talked about, how we're incorporating our collections and the specimens we have here, all of that is really for us to create those first wow moments for students, for youth. So we are creating ways for students to notice and wonder about really the nature around them, and especially with that focus on waterways as we're moving forward with really the importance of water conservation. And then we're helping them to then connect to other organizations and take that back to their classroom, to their home, and move forward and explore further. So thank you very much. And there's Sheldon again. And I guess we will do Q&A. So I'll stop. Oh, sorry, hit the wrong button. I will stop sharing the screen there. So.
Great. Thanks so much, Cathy and Brendan. That was really cool to get a virtual inside peek of your collections and getting to see your box turtle. That was great. It sounds like there's going to be some really exciting things going on at the museum in the future. So we do have a couple minutes to ask some questions if folks want to type them into the Q&A box. And I think a couple came in already, so let me take a look. So we had one question come in. Somebody wanted to know more about the interactive touch wall. How does the interactive touch wall work?
Yeah, so how that works, we have a short throw projector, if anyone is familiar with that kind of technology, and that's hooked up to a Microsoft tablet and an iPad. So through all of those, and I can't pretend to be familiar with exactly how the technology operates, but through that system, we can pull up an app on the Microsoft tablet or have something up on the iPad, and basically that's all connected to the wall through touch points on the projector. So it's basically like you're standing in front of a giant iPad for the most part.
Very cool. All right, we have one more question that we'll do. I'm curious to know how the museum renovations will create a sense of place for visitors that are more familiar with the Piedmont region. It seems like the renovations will have a lot of coastal plain references.
Yeah, that's a great question. The picture that I had shared in the presentation was a little blocked. It wasn't the full image, I should say. So we are doing a lot with the coastal plain, but we will be having an entire area of the Delaware Gallery focused on temperate forests. And specifically, we are imagining the forest as if like right outside here at the museum. We're up here in Greenville, Delaware in the Piedmont. So that area is going to be a focus on Piedmont there. We are also going to be having within that room, again, it was a little hard to see because we had to zoom in on the image. And we have a Delaware research station, and we're going to have some different areas there. So we will be sharing research throughout Delaware that's being done in Delaware. And then we will also be having special interactive elements, post-COVID, definitely more, but that people can borrow and go out and explore the actual ecosystems right behind the museum as well. So we're kind of starting that exploration. So Piedmont is definitely being represented there. It was a little hard to tell in that one particular photo, but we're definitely taking that to account. So thank you.
Great. And then we have one more good question I want to ask. Transportation to a museum is always a cost factor. Will your virtual developments mean that more students might experience your treasures after COVID as well?
Yeah, so one of the things we've already found with virtual programming is that we're really able to expand our audience and make sure that lots of students, especially in underserved communities, can experience our programming. So with the anonymous grant that we received, generally each year we've gotten about the same amount of money because of the kind of lower cost of a virtual program, able to expand the number of programs that we're offering. And I think as most museums and other nonprofits have come to realize, there is no limit as to who we can provide virtual programming for. It allows us to really expand to, we're hoping to expand to different areas in North America outside of kind of our current communities that we serve in New Jersey, Pennsylvania, Delaware, and Maryland. So.
And post-COVID, hopefully when things get back to normal with field trips, a lot of our grant funding does include coverage for transportation fees. So that was one of the big things that we always wanted to include with that. So hopefully when we get back to that, we will be able to cover transportation as well.
Well, great. Thanks again so much. If you do have any other questions for Cathy or Brendan, you can reach out to them via email. I can go ahead. I'll add their email addresses into the chat box. And with that, we're going to turn it over to Robin to present on the Alliance for Watershed Education of the Delaware River and learn about their unique fellow program. So Robin, whenever you're ready, take it away.
All right. Thank you, Emily. And thank you, folks. I appreciate it hearing all that. I'm excited to come visit that whale when it's all set up, put together. Let me share my screen here. Boom, there we go. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Robin Irizarry. I am the Fellowship Coordinator for the Alliance for Watershed Education. Today, we're going to talk about what the Alliance is, and particularly our fellowship program. So what is the Alliance for Watershed Education? Well, we're a collaborative of 23 environmental education centers across Pennsylvania, New Jersey, and Delaware. We're connected by the Delaware River and its tributaries, as well as the Circuit Trail Network. Centers are located from the Poconos to Wilmington, from Camden, all the way down to Trenton and over to Reading. Independently, each of these organizations have been active providing watershed-focused environmental education in support of their communities and a healthy Delaware River watershed. In 2016, through the support of the William Penn Foundation, these 23 centers were brought together to learn from each other and develop new tools to work more effectively towards our shared goals. These environmental centers vary in nature from very small nonprofits, some operating without a physical environmental center, to large agencies managing hundreds of acres of land. They also vary in the different communities they serve and the specific watershed issues that impact their communities, from urban to rural, from combined sewer systems to agricultural runoff. So what is AWE doing? What are we up to? Well, our mission is to collectively increase and enhance constituent appreciation, knowledge, and stewardship of the Delaware River watershed, leading to greater protection and restoration of the watershed. The goals of the Alliance are to challenge and equip member centers to create a larger and more inclusive constituency of people engaged at and near our centers and their waterways. We want to increase and enhance constituent attitudes, knowledge, and intention to act to ensure a healthy Delaware River watershed. And we want to collaborate, learn from one another, and deliver high-quality, inclusive watershed education programs that are sensitive to community priorities. I want to emphasize this challenge and equip piece of the statement because as an alliance, we want to push ourselves to do this work more effectively, more equitably, and to learn from each other and work together to build the tools we need to succeed. Throughout the Alliance, in everything we do, we're working to apply a diversity, equity, inclusion, and justice focus. We're seeking to be intentional in our work to build a more culturally and ethnically diverse environmental conservation movement, recognizing the disparities between the composition of our organization's existing audiences, staff, and leadership, and the watershed communities with which we engage. Work of the Alliance is done through smaller working groups composed of staff from the individual 23 centers, a handful of dedicated AW staff members with an elected steering committee to help guide our efforts. And currently, we're in the process of hiring AW's very first managing director, which is very exciting. A lot of the work of the Alliance is internal, focusing on helping our member centers learn from each other, to collaborate together and work more effectively to increase our collective impact across the watershed. These tools we're developing include Alliance-wide trainings and webinars, such as our semi-annual Watershed Professionals Institute, as well as re-grant opportunities to pilot new collaborative programs. Work also includes collaborative outward-reaching projects to directly engage our shared constituents, such as AW's environmental art initiatives, our annual River Days programs that take place in the fall, and the Delaware River Watershed Fellowship Program, which is what we're going to be spending a little time talking about today. This program has been AW's first major collaborative program. Early on, we recognized that we need to be actively working to address disparities between the composition of our communities and that of our organizations and their leadership. That our organizations need to reflect our communities and their priorities if we're to make meaningful progress on addressing environmental issues. The intent of the fellowship is to create career pathways for a diverse cohort of future professionals and community leaders into the environmental conservation field, while at the same time building capacity for centers to reach more people through summer programs. This fellowship is a 12-week paid summer position for individuals at each of the 23 environmental centers. During this time, fellows receive basic watershed education training and gain hands-on experience in the field, serving as environmental educators and ambassadors with their host center and helping to develop new and innovative programs to reach a broader audience. The goals of the program are to increase and enhance constituent attitudes, knowledge, and intention to act, to ensure a healthy Delaware River watershed, and to create a larger and more inclusive constituency of people engaged at and near our centers and their waterways. So who are the fellows? What do they do? Well, our typical fellows are 18 to 24. We have a particular focus of our efforts in recruiting fellowship candidates from within the communities where they'll be focusing their work. To date, we've hired a culturally and ethnically diverse cohort of nearly 100 alumni over the past 4 seasons. Our 12-week summer fellowship runs June through August. We begin with a 3-day orientation of shared watershed training at the Pocono Environmental Education Center, something like Watershed Boot Camp. This includes Watershed 101, conversations around authentic community engagement, panels of guest speakers from across the Alliance, team building opportunities to build camaraderie across the centers, and chances to get out and explore the river together. Throughout the summer, we host a series of webinars for fellows with opportunities to learn about watershed initiatives even beyond AW, featuring partners like the Delaware River Watershed Initiative, Circuit Trails, and our next webinar coming up will be with the Coalition for the Delaware River Watershed, all about advocacy and how to become a better advocate within your own community for environmental issues. The main focus of the fellows' work during the summer is what we call their capstone work. This is a community engagement-based project. They're developed by the fellows and their supervisors and meant to address specific needs of the community, programmatic needs of the center, while exploring and celebrating the skills and interests and ideas of the fellow that they bring to the table. Some examples of these capstone projects would include, right here in the corner, you can see with the Kramer Hill sign, our wonderful fellows this past summer from Camden all worked together to develop this program called Virtually Camden. Essentially online virtual tours, videos of all these wonderful waterfront green spaces all around Camden to really help Camden residents connect with these spaces, realize that these spaces are there for them to take advantage of. Another example would be documenting best practices for some of the education tools being developed at some of these sites, such as our tricycle mounted mobile environmental education carts, which are really cool. And at least 3-4 different centers have piloted these in past years and kind of documented what's working and ways that they're reaching new folks. Fellows showcase their accomplishments. Sorry, I bumped ahead there. Fellows showcase their accomplishments and their capstone work at the end of season summit at the end of every summer. Beyond that summer program, we've had the opportunity to provide extension grants to centers to extend a fellow's employment part-time over the fall and winter, so that we can extend that experience for them to gain more experience, and so that we can have time for them to continue working on those community relationships they've been building, helping centers communicate with their target audiences. As an alliance, we also want to continue to support our fellows beyond their summer employment. So we've been working to build out our alumni network. We're maintaining avenues for folks to communicate new job opportunities within the alliance and beyond, and offering professional development training opportunities as the fellows continue on in their careers. This coming year, we're going to be piloting a one-on-one mentorship component for our alumni network and incoming fellows. So we get asked sometimes, why are we calling it a fellowship versus, say, an internship? And it's the kind of thing where we see this being a relationship that we're building beyond just this 12-week experience. We want our fellows to feel like they're part of the alliance, and in moving forward in their careers as they go down this path, we want to be there to support them and in whatever ways that we can. So 4 years in, what kinds of challenges have we experienced? What opportunities for learning have we seen, in general, and specifically this past year, which was chock full of challenges and opportunities. In general, one of the main things that we're learning is around recruitment, exploring active recruitment strategies. It's a different approach for many centers, emphasizing building up community relationships and connections in order to find the right fellows, as opposed to casting a broad net through listservs or social media. We want to offer recruitment support for our centers, recognizing that this may not be the typical way that internship positions are broadcast, for instance. We want to meet with those fellow supervisors ahead of time to talk through recruitment, figure out what's working, help them explore new avenues to find new fellows. We're providing training opportunities for those supervisors as well. We have one coming up this week in anticipation of our upcoming summer fellowship in 2021. We recognize that the right fit of a fellow to a center may not necessarily be based on the resume that you're seeing with an environmental science degree or a ton of field experience. And what we want to make sure is that what we're emphasizing is finding fellows who are eager to learn and share what they're learning with their friends and families and community members. Finding someone who's really eager to step into that ambassador role and do that community engagement. Another question we're working through is how can we help our supervisors and centers in becoming more culturally competent and learning how to be a welcoming and safe space for incoming fellows, especially in cases where you're inviting a person of color into predominantly white organizations, which is something that we've seen happen several times through this program, and we want to be mindful and approach that sensitively. The experience of the fellow and the culture of that organization that they're stepping into. We want to make sure that we're doing everything we can to support that organization and their growth to be a more welcoming space. In order to better support those fellows and improve that culture within our organizations, AWE has been developing and offering network-wide training opportunities designed to build knowledge and cultural competency within our organizations. And we're working with a great outfit called Youth Outside to really help dial in these trainings to make sure that our organizations are putting in the work to, be welcoming spaces and be mindful of what we're inviting people into. Another learning opportunity for us is in developing, determining the best ways to support our alumni beyond their summer fellowship work. We're building avenues of communication to help them stay connected to the Alliance and each other, while also sharing job opportunities, professional development training. Looking at this year in particular, we've had to be pretty flexible. We've had to adapt programming in the face of COVID, as has everyone. But there were a lot of complications that obviously came up very early in the spring when we had pretty much finalized what we were doing this summer, what our plan was going to look like. And we basically had to flip that all on its side and figure out, what this program was going to look like. We moved ahead with a half-size cohort, recognizing that some centers weren't able, they weren't in a position to host the fellow given the circumstances with places being shut down, folks not being able to visit. We've had to take essentially what is, an in-person program very much focused on in-person engagement and take it almost completely virtual. We typically thrive on hands-on outdoor engagement, but when we realized we had to change everything, we had to reimagine a lot of what this program would look like. And so that meant our virtual orientation in the spring was different than what you'd expect in a typical year. We didn't get to take folks up to the Poconos, which is typically a very unifying time for our fellows cohort. So we had to really make sure that we're still creating opportunities in this virtual realm for connecting. One of the fun ways in which we did that was we sent care packages to all the fellows, and we had a virtual campfire with s'mores. We sent them all little tea lights and marshmallows and sticks and in the mail, and then we all got on Zoom and pulled up a YouTube video of a crackling campfire there, and we all kind of sat there and toasted our marshmallows together. So we found ways to make it fun and to still connect despite not being able to get together in person on the level that we would in a typical year. The capstone work, of course, had to shift, being that fellows typically would be leading people on bird walks and nature tours and that kind of thing, bike rides, kayak rides. Fellows were really flexible, and their centers as well, in figuring out ways to overcome this. We had fellows developing online videos and self-guided tours. We had fellows putting together DIY kits, like you see in the top right photo here, that were mailed out to, homes in the community, allowing people to do their own self-guided work and put together little activities for children. The events of the summer, the summer is obviously, this summer was a tough time to try and pull off a big program like this. When we typically run June through August, and June was a really tough time to be focusing on anything other than what was happening in the news. I gotta say, on top of the pandemic, we had racial injustice and unrest just kind of blowing up all over the place, and it dominated so much of our minds, was at the forefront of our minds. We definitely wanted to make space to talk about that and recognize that this is happening in our communities. We're not operating, this program doesn't operate in a void outside of all of that. This is our lives, these are our communities. As an alliance, we recognize the importance of holding space to discuss these things together and what it means for our work. We held an all-wide conversation for fellows and alliance members to come together and reflect. And this was the first time we really had a big all-wide conversation of this nature about racial justice and these issues like this. And It was really well received. Fellows definitely, the feedback we got was that they appreciated seeing how unified the Alliance was in this, and coming together to, do something, make sure that our efforts were aligned with supporting our communities, and particularly our communities of color. So 4 years in, let's talk about what we're seeing and what's worked, and some of the results we're seeing. We did conduct an alumni survey this past year, looking at all 4 of our past years to get a sense of, hey, we've been at this for 4 years. Where are folks at? What's going on? How's this working? So what we know is that about a third of our fellows are currently employed in a related field, and 59% of our fellows who are enrolled in college have declared a related major. 71% have indicated that they intend to remain involved in the field of environmental conservation. We know that 16% of our fellows are still engaged with their AW centers, whether employed or volunteering their time. And at least 10 fellows have been hired at AW organizations beyond their fellowship. And we're happy to know that fellows have also gone on to work with other partners doing related work. We're excited to see them making progress. Looking at our fellowship demographics, we know that an average of the cohorts, we've seen greater than 50% identifying as non-white, indicating that efforts to build a culturally and ethnically diverse cohort of future environmental leaders is being met with some success. We have some recruitment numbers here. 58% of fellows hired this past summer were hired directly from within those communities where they were working. 25% were outside the community, but otherwise had connections to that community. This is something we want to be constantly pushing ourselves to dial this in and really have, we think we can have the most impact by really making sure these positions are being broadcast to our local community and prioritizing these opportunities. Regular evaluation of the fellowship program consistently reveals a positive shift in fellows' self-efficacy towards environmental action and an improved ability on the part of the center to reach a more diverse constituency. I won't read through all these, but you can see we have some alumni testimonials where essentially, folks are telling us this was a meaningful experience for them. They think this is, going to be a really defining part of their early career here. So what are our next steps? What's happening for the fellowship? Well, we are going to begin recruitment for the 2021 season this winter. And we're already beginning to meet with supervisors to dial in those recruitment efforts and help folks explore new creative ways to make sure that we get these opportunities out to as many folks as possible and a great candidate pool. We're excited to be piloting a mentorship component this coming year to support our fellows and alumni in a one-on-one capacity. We'll be pairing up incoming fellows and interested alumni with mentors from across the Alliance, helping folks connect with other watershed and environmental conservation professionals that perhaps share common ground around similar life experience, identities, or career paths. And lastly, if you have job opportunities that you want to send our way, we have a great candidate pool. Like I said, over just shy of 100 people have gone through this program at this time. We still hear from many of them. So we definitely are always looking for opportunities we can send their way to maybe be the next step in the career path for these young people. So if you have opportunities at your place of employment, feel free to reach out to me. My email is down there, robin.irizarry@audubon.org. And with that, I want to say thank you for taking time to talk this afternoon. Thanks, Emily.
Thanks so much, Robin, for sharing that information about the fellowship program, especially how you support the fellows beyond the program. That's fantastic. And some of the COVID modifications you had to make, as well as the importance of coordinating with local communities. So we do have just a minute or two. Maybe we'll do one question before we wrap up, so we do end the webinar on time for folks to get to whatever they have left on their agenda for today. So one question was, what are some ways that you think environmental nonprofits outside of the network could do to support the alumni network?
I think, you know, we're always looking for opportunities to provide professional development for these young people. Like I said, you know, career opportunities, certainly we want to hear about all those, but if there are trainings and programs that, you know, we think would be beneficial to, you know, advertise to our young people, you know, we want to support that as much as possible. So definitely connect with me if you want to reach out. If you have additional questions about the program, feel free to reach out. You can get my contact info from the slide there, or I'm sure we'll have a way to connect with folks after this.
All right, great. Thanks again, Robin. Again, we did drop everyone's email addresses in the chat box. We'll also be sending out a follow-up email with some information. But again, you know, this, you know, wasn't the final webinar in this series, but it certainly won't be our last. So stay tuned for future webinars as we continue to work in this virtual space right now. Thanks again to all of our fantastic speakers who participated in this series and presented today. In 2021, PDE will be hosting a virtual Delaware Estuary Science and Environmental Summit in March. So just want to make a quick plug for that. This is the first time that we're doing this conference virtually. And there will be lots of great content on restoration monitoring, climate change, as well as education and outreach, as well as some more topics as well. So you can find more details about the conference. We're going to drop a link in the chat. And thanks again to everyone for attending today's webinar. We hope that everyone enjoyed it, and we will be sending out some follow-up emails that include the recording to this webinar, some links and resources, links to the slide decks from our fantastic presenters today, and we hope to see all of you at future PDE webinars. Thanks again, and enjoy the rest of your day. Bye.